Hello, my name is Jason and I go by the artist name Manhattan Mobley. Today we are exploring the sound of collaboration in preparation for my album release on 7/14. Today we are discussing the silent partner in collaboration, the sound of the technology that helps facilitate collaboration in the modern era. I'm excited to introduce our next guest, which is Justin from Chaos Made Coherent, who is a musician, sound engineer, and filmmaker who studies philosophy. He also is working on an album called Meaning in the Manic. We recently did a cinematic improv collaboration that you can see linked in the comments below. And what's cool about our collaboration dynamic is that we both can balance the tech support side of things and the creative performance side of a project. Usually people get stuck in one or the other, often loving the performance but hating the technology. But we seem to be able to, bridge that gap pretty effortlessly. And before we dive into that silent partner of our tech, I'd love to know, what is your history with technology, and at what point did the gears stop being a tool you had to learn and start becoming an extension of your creative voice?
That's a really good question,
Mhm.
Jason. So thanks for having me on, by the way. Appreciate being here. So I just want to say, initially, it started from a very young age. Like I would, make home movies and with our video camera and whatnot when I was much younger, like in middle school. And I've always just loved film. I've always loved music, and I after I graduated from high school, I decided to go to film or not film school, sorry, sound engineering school.
Mhm.
And so essentially, that was the training ground for all of this. And we also did a little bit of post-production as well in sound engineering school.
Nice.
They introduced us into editing for film and making music for film.
Perfect.
And so that was kind of the precursor to me getting into film as
Mhm.
well. But before I went back to school for digital cinematography, um, and I traveled around for many years in my early 20s. I consider myself a traveling musician. I lived in an RV for a little while. I busked on the street, and so on and so forth. So it was a long process, so to speak. I first I had to develop my musicianship, and really understand the fundamentals of music, and then I always wanted to record my music, but I didn't have the technology that I needed in order to be able to do so.
Right.
So once I settled down in Colorado about a decade ago or so, I slowly started building this the gear and like the repertoire of music, and like just slowly starting to implement those ideas into actually being able to record albums.
Yeah.
So that being said, after all was said and done, I've released several albums on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, other streaming platforms, and so on and so forth. And you can find me on Spotify or YouTube under the name Arcane Theorem. But to answer your question, sorry, I know that was a very long explanation, but I just wanted to give a little bit of context. So essentially, when it stopped becoming like the gear stopped becoming like a problematic thing because I didn't know how to utilize it in the best way. Really, my first album, The Unknown Variable, took about 2 to 3 years to actually record, and I finally released it in 2020, right when the pandemic hit. Um, so I started recording around 2017, 2018, roughly, and really working out the kinks within the recording software.
Mhm.
Initially, I was trained on Pro Tools. I became a Pro Tools certified operator in college. Um, and then I kind of moved over to like GarageBand and Logic, and I know a little bit of Ableton and stuff like that. But um, it once I slowly started integrating my ideas into actual usable, like it takes the process is very frustrating at first because if you don't understand the technology that you're using, it's not even just the recording aspect, it's the editing and the mixing and the mastering. It's like all of that takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of hours. Like when I was in sound engineering school, the school would be open until midnight. I'd be editing almost every night, recording, practicing, post production. Like it takes hours and hours and hours and a lot of effort and a lot of patience. Patience is key because if you're not patient with your technology, it will not be patient with you. And if you get the spinning wheel of death, okay, you just got to take a break, or like take a breather, take a 5 minute break. Okay, I'm gonna even like looking at a screen for a long time, your eyes start bugging out, and you're wearing headphones for a long time. Like I can't hear the mix anymore. I don't know what I'm listening to because I've heard it like 10 times in a row. It's just very frustrating. So
Yeah, for real.
if there are any advice I could give to anybody out there who is looking to get into this industry, whether it be music or film or anything of that nature, have patience with yourself. Be kind to yourself and don't get too frustrated, because
Hmm.
it's gonna take a lot. Just like learning a musical instrument. Some people is like when you're a kid, I want to be a rock star, like when I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be Elvis, like and then Kurt Cobain when I was in high school and like all these other people was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I want to be like them. But the thing is I was just had to be like me. And so, just be yourself and everybody learns differently, so it's gonna take a different process for everybody. So
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love your experience in the sound engineering school too. How do you think,
yeah.
because you started off from what I heard as from the musician side, right? From like,
Mhm.
and then you moved into more the technological side of it and really
Mhm.
getting, how did the sound of your own musicianship change when you started understanding like Pro Tools and all the
Mhm.
DAWs and the softwares and listening differently through that
It,
training?
that's a good question. I remember there was a classmate of mine in high school. Towards the end of high school, they actually started teaching us a little bit of sound
Hmm.
engineering. Like they had like a mixing board in one of the band rooms, and like we had somebody come in and try and show us how to use the technology. And that classmate ended up also going to sound engineering school, I do believe, after high school. He was like, to me, like to him, like it took some of the magic away from the music because you see behind the curtain, you see like all
Yeah.
the things that go into it, and like it doesn't seem as magical anymore. But the more that you get into it, like okay, you get the workflow going, and it's like okay, this like with me and Jason, for instance, like we spent an hour to an hour and a half just trying to get our technology to work because I brought over my gear to his place and we were trying to integrate our systems together, so to speak. And once we figured it out, it was like boom, like we can make music now. That's one of the most frustrating things when you're first starting is like you spend an hour or two or more sometimes working out technical like difficulties, and then you don't even want to make music anymore because your brain's fried basically, and you're frustrated. Like I just wanted to make music, and why can't I do this? That's why it's key to have patience because if you're not familiar with working with this technology, it's going to be frustrating at first.
Yeah, I loved your reminder about patience because the spinning wheel of death and the amount of hours that goes into this stuff is
Yeah, yeah,
insane. And that's just the pre-production. That's just getting prepared to do the thing, not even like doing the thing and then the
yep,
post-production and all the crazy stuff
yeah,
afterwards.
right.
And it really does affect the sound though, depending on that quality of can you sit with
Mm,
this long enough? And you did, I loved how you equated it to an instrument as well, like music. Like it
mm,
literally is this thing you have to practice over time, and as you get better at it, it gets softer and it becomes smoother, and then it
mm.
impacts you less when you have to spend an hour fiddling about with the technology.
Right, and that's the thing is like I've been playing music for over 20 years and I play multiple different instruments. And so
Yeah.
like once you learn music theory, you can apply that to any instrument. Like with
Hmm.
sound engineering, it's called signal flow. So like you have to learn
Yeah.
how the signal flows from you playing, strumming the guitar into recording the microphone, how that microphone signal, like how it transduces the sound into being able to become a sound like digital, like sound wave to a digital wave into the software and how it actually gets recorded. And so like for instance, if your gain is up too high, the volume's up too high, or when you're playing the guitar, you're gonna clip your track, and then it's gonna sound terrible.
Yeah.
Like you have to learn the right volume that needs to be at, like, and it gets even more and more complex the more you get into editing, mixing, and mastering. It's such a process. And up until recently, I hadn't even like started doing my own mastering, like I was using
Yeah.
other AI programs to help me master my own
Mm.
stuff because
Mm.
I didn't understand
It's a whole
like
thing.
how to do that. But now that I'm getting into it, I was like, okay, this is easy. You're literally just taking your mix and just like adjusting the frequencies slightly and balancing the mix so it sounds good all around. You can hear all the instruments,
Mm.
all the voices, whatever. It's just like you need to be able to if you know how you want something to sound, but you don't know how to make the technology do what you're hearing,
Mm.
like if you don't know how to adjust the frequencies in the right way when you're mastering the EQ and stuff like that, it's just like it's frustrating because even I spend hours just like adjusting like little
Plumbing.
minute things. It's just like
That
it
almost
throws the
nobody will
entire
hear, but I
it
spent
throws the
hours on
entire rest of the mix off.
it.
And I can hear it, and like because my ears have been trained, I took ear training in
Yeah, yeah.
college, and like I can hear those frequencies. Like, what is that? Like, I don't know what that is, and why does it sound bad?
Yeah, what is this one little thing that's off? Oh my God.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
think
yep.
that, yeah, because okay, so I know you have the technical background where you learned a lot, but you also
Mhm.
have this like mastering where you're just kind of like figuring it out. Do you think you have
Mhm.
a preference at this point between the easiest way to learn it is just to do the thing, or is it more of a you actually book learning is really important to establish a baseline?
I
Or
mean,
yeah,
not I mostly learned by doing,
yeah,
like even with learning an instrument, like after I learn how to play the instrument,
yeah,
then I just kind of use my ear and like over time your ear just kind of like and even the more you listen to other artists and
yeah,
stuff like that, you like pick up on like, okay, that's actually the same chord progression as this song. I'm like, wait a second, maybe it's the exact same four chords, but maybe in a different key or like maybe a different tempo or whatever. Like a lot of songs actually use the same chord structures, like 1 4 5,
yeah,
like
yeah,
or like 1 3 5 or whatever the case might be. Like once you start listening for the patterns, you hear them everywhere, and like, okay, this is what they're doing, but how do I do that? How do I apply that to my own music, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so the key is literally to just whatever your favorite artist is, or whoever, like if you have multiple favorite artists, what I did when I was younger is like I listened to the entire discography,
yeah,
like of like the Beatles or like David Bowie or like Radiohead or like, and I tried to understand what made them great, like, and then I could apply that and try to emulate them and then try to apply that to my own music and but not trying to replicate them in that sense, but trying to borrow ideas from them. And like that's what good artist does, like they borrow ideas and make it their own because in today's world there's so much content out there because of the advent of the internet, and it's got oversaturated, so they say there's no more original like works, and like you can't make anything original anymore basically.
mm-hmm.
And like I don't think that's true because if if the industry, like the music industry and the film industry, are so focused on making money, and they're basically just reiterating the same idea over and over again. Now that's not a new idea. I don't remember who came up with this idea, but there's only like 9 different types of like stories you could ever possibly write. They all
Yeah,
fit into this one of these categories, right? But and that might be true, like because people have been writing books and literature for thousands of years.
yeah,
It's
nothing
just
new.
it's been done before, but within those different streams of consciousness, so to speak, like the hero's journey, like the romantic story, like whatever the case might be, you can take that genre and make it your own. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be like 5 sequels of the same, like series of like they're just and then there might not even be a good storyline.
Yeah, for
They
real
might not
though.
be a good story arc. They're just literally just pumping out content.
Yeah,
It's not quality. It's quantity. That's what in the past I was like, okay, I'm gonna write an album and I really just want to release this as soon as possible. And that's the thing, it's like it doesn't have to be perfect. Most
mm-hmm.
music, like mainstream music, like they polish it and polish it and polish it and put so much compression on it so it can go over radio waves and like be heard on the radio, which is fine. But now we have streaming services, right? So we don't need to compress it so much. And like even like MP3s, like the audio quality, the fidelity of the audio is like what they're doing is they're taking the sound wave and they're going like this. And like you literally just don't hear as much. So like when you listen to a vinyl record, the fidelity or lossless audio, the fidelity of the audio, you can hear all the frequencies. They're not compressing it down into this condensed wave like this, so like it feels more full, And so there's so much to think about when you're doing this stuff and like trying to get lost in all the technical, jargon. But the more you listen, the more you watch, whether it's film or music or art or dance or whatever,
Hmm.
um, the more you watch other people doing their craft, like it gives you a sense of where you want to be, like it lets you aim for something, but your bar is going to start much lower and you can start raising the bar over time,
Hmm.
right? The better you get at your craft, but you have to set the bar really low at first because if you don't, you're gonna get super frustrated. It's like, why am I not a rock star yet? Why am I not a movie star yet?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that within itself is patience is key, right? So ultimately, so to,
Yeah.
to answer your question
Totally,
in a
yes.
very roundabout way.
There's three things that came up for me actually during that whole thing.
Yeah.
One,
Yeah.
nothing new under the sun. If you haven't seen the first collaboration sound of collaboration video episode, you should check it out because he talks.
Yeah.
Seth, the poet, great poet, he talked all about that, and it's so
Cool.
accurate. It's a lot of these things are the technology that we're using isn't necessarily innovative. The stuff we're doing
Mhm.
isn't like super changing, but the way that we're using it and applying it is different.
Mhm.
We all have access to the same levels of technology today, especially in America.
Yeah.
It's just a question of how you're using it and how your experience of using it is, and
Right.
that's what I love, our ability to hop back and forth. And then two, um, talking about that, I love that idea of the compression because it's so real. When you listen to music on a really good speaker system, you can hear the amount of
Yeah.
air that is missing
Mhm.
from
Right.
most music because if you play it at a compressed stream, it's not hitting as much. And for context, in my space, while you weren't able to see my speakers, the reason you can't see them is that they're very, very tiny monitor speakers on the floor, which is the worst possible place to put it. I'm still working. I have a small space, so it's like trying to get it all to work. But that affected our ability to collaborate. I remember at the beginning of our session, like it was having way too much bass booming. We were trying to increase the volume to a certain level, and then because of that,
Mhm.
also we weren't able to even explore some of the higher registers or lower registers of the sound. We only had access to that very middle section because of the limitations of my
Mhm.
specific setup.
Yeah.
And so it's just wild to think that's why professional recorders, you have entire studios that are perfectly sound designed and they can hear every single detail because they are hitting that highest
Mhm.
level of fidelity. Whereas we are starting a little bit lower, but that's right where we're at, and that's the perfect. But it's that exploration of how the technology in your space literally affects your ability to collaborate. And our collaboration would have sounded different had we been in a professional recording studio with the highest fidelity speakers.
Right.
Absolutely would have changed. Or if we had five people, would have completely changed it versus doing it in my little apartment. Okay, so anyways, I digress there. But I love the idea of your patterns. That was my third idea that I was coming up with there. Because it's the idea that there was a specific pattern I noticed in our collaboration. So I wanted to kind of shift the conversation to our specific collaboration because there was
Yeah.
really distinct patterns between pre-production before we arrived and started setting things up, during
Mhm.
the actual performance, during this type of remote collaboration as well,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
finally in that post-production. And
Mhm.
for me, that pattern I noticed most consistently was fiddling about for a long period of time, and then moments of magic happen and just everything works, and you're like, oh, we're done, right? Great. One take,
Yeah.
out, done, move on. So, is that pretty consistent for you when you're just moving through this, or what was your experience during this whole process, especially in the before we even started the first note? Like we fiddled about for like a couple hours at least. Yeah.
Funnily enough, I'm hearing a popping or
Oh, is that
crackling
really?
sound in the audios right now. So like even right now as we're doing the Zoom call, like there can always be technical difficulties as you're doing the thing.
Yeah.
Like you have to stop in the middle and kind of like, did I just hear something?
What's happening?
That even so to answer your question, yeah. So like, um, can you rephrase that for me just a little bit so I
So,
can get a clearer
yeah.
idea
So,
of what?
what was your experience? What do you remember most about the tech setup part of what you arrived to my place? You had all your gear. You didn't even know quite
Yeah.
what I had in my studio, so you over prepared,
Right.
right? I love a
Yes.
guy with a lot of extra gear, so same with me. But it was just like, what was your experience walking into the space and then doing all the technical details we had to do before our first note was played?
Um, so my experience is like, okay, yes, I did over prepare. I stay up until like 1 a.m. the night before,
Hmm.
like literally packing. Not maybe that wasn't that day. Sorry, I'm getting my days mixed up. No, but I did bring a lot of gear, and so I brought my film gear, brought my camera, brought my lights, I brought my laptop, I brought probably 5 instruments.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what I was getting into. And so once I got there, I probably only maybe used like a third of it. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, not even, like maybe like a quarter of it. And so really knowing how to optimize your workflow is key. It's even just like, like doing the hard work, like lifting the gear,
Hmm.
that takes stress out on your body and stuff like that. But like once I got familiarized with your space, like, okay, this is the space we have to work with. This is your setup. This is how my gear can work with yours potentially. And we spent like an hour to hour and a half trying to fiddle with it and trying to make my gear work with yours and so it can
Yeah.
talk to each other basically. Um, and it wasn't actually that bad. I've had a lot worse. Like
Okay.
there's been days where I try and make music with other people and like we can't figure it out because our gear is just not compatible
Mm.
in some way or fashion, or we have to find a workaround or something. Um, so having the ability to think on your feet, like, why is this not working? Right? Maybe I need to switch this cable, or maybe even the cable might be bad. Like they might you have to
That's one
do
thing.
when you're troubleshooting. It's like you have to go through every single component, like what could be going wrong right now. And sometimes it's just a bad cable or a bad connection on your guitar or something. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, the equipment itself and the technology, like technology is great when it works, but when it doesn't, like it's very problematic usually. And it's just like it
Hmm.
leads to one thing after another, especially in sound engineering. Like if you don't have the right signal flow, you're gonna start getting feedback loops and stuff like that. And like you're gonna have to like cover
Yeah.
your ears and like why am I getting feedback from my amp or from through the speakers? Like what is going on?
Yeah.
Um,
That's cool.
so
Yeah.
what I think is like when you are setting up like a new or trying to integrate new gear into your particular system, you really have to understand what the gear is actually, what its function is, and where that audio is being routed or the video is being routed. Because if you don't know how to work with signal flow or you don't know how to work with video signals and stuff like that, like you're not, it's not going to be easy because technology can get very complex very quickly.
Yeah.
And usually the simplest answer is the right one, like Occam's razor, like we were talking about last time. But sometimes it can like you can get overwhelmed by the complexity of it, and usually it's just like one thing messing everything else up.
Yeah.
And
Literally.
like once you find that one kink in the hose, so to speak, then you're like, okay, now the signal can flow through that hose, right?
Yeah.
So like it gets very frustrating. And like my recommendation is to take a step back, take a breather if you need to, and come back at it from a fresh perspective and not try to get too overwhelmed.
Yeah,
So
agreed. I'm glad that
yeah.
your experience wasn't so horrible because because honestly, for me, I felt like we got into a pretty quick flow from the first moment. It was like, oh, cool, love all the
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, let's see what we got. And like, let's figure it out. Okay, that's not working. How about we try electric guitar? Oh, let's try the acoustic guitar instead and plug it directly in. And
Right. And
I,
that's what I'm looking
yeah,
for. It's like we try to mess with it a little bit, but yeah, go on.
yeah, exactly. I I do agree with the signal flow thing. I've spent years working on this. I've been on this project of trying to get live orchestration for years, the ability to quickly do arrangements always. And I designed this entire my setup entirely to be modular so that I could do that. I think the two biggest pieces of the technology that helped this whole situation and personally was one my EQ is my CQ ADB digital mixer, which I love, as
Yeah.
also stands, lots of stands to be able to rearrange things.
Mhm.
Because actually, after our session, I ended up rearranging things to make it more efficient so that we could fit things a part of it. But that mixer was, I think, the last key for this all to work, so we can plug different things in, make things work. Even that didn't quite work because we had that electric guitar that wasn't quite being able to get
Yeah,
powered, and
you
then
need
it didn't
that
work.
interface to
Yep, we
be an
needed that
intermediate between the guitar and your system.
exactly.
So, because your system was a little bit more complicated than just my like Focusrite Scarlett.
Yeah, we just go straight
You
to it.
know, it was just like it's simple. It just has two inputs, two outputs,
Yeah,
and we're good.
and
You
we're
know, like
good.
we don't need all these extra outputs because we're just using one guitar basically.
Yeah, and it's funny with especially when you're trying to do more complex things with like recording and everything because the electricity you have to start having to understand like how
Yes.
electricity works and physics because
Yep. Oh,
things
yeah.
grounding things. It was funny. You don't know this one yet, but I was doing some of the editing on some of the videos on some of the music, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's a buzz on the because of the Scarlet because it's probably some electrical interference happening with all our stuff. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I had to try like removing that from the the EQ. I'm like, okay, that's 600 hertz is like needs to get
Right.
removed.
Yeah, it's like
But like, anyways, it's so fascinating how all of that just affects it. And then, luckily for me, the whenever I switch between like doing really technical stuff and really creative stuff, it kind of feels the same. It feels like the same channel for me. So
yeah.
like when we switched over from doing fiddling for an hour and then got right into the music making, I was like, one, it was a relief to do it, but also it was just like, great, we
Yeah.
finished it, cool. Let's do the
Right.
next one.
Yeah.
And then I think we took a break or something after that and did another
Yeah.
two sessions, and
Yeah.
it kind of worked pretty smoothly. The one thing though, I think did you mention you might have mentioned a little bit about latency at one point, or I'm remembering a previous conversation.
No, no.
But yeah, but the in person, the one thing that you can't replicate with technology is instant feedback.
Yeah.
And the one thing you didn't hear on the recording was the difference between hearing a live saxophone in my ear versus how loud it is versus actually what is happening on the recording. The recording sounds perfectly balanced,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in reality, it was a really loud thing. Or hearing, I remember one of the things that we first did, I remember was you were playing the electric guitar
Mm.
and but I loved hearing how pingy it was in real life, like that
Yeah.
instant hit. And I was like, "Ooh, I love that." The
Yeah.
solution eventually was we should do this on we shouldn't add effects and stuff on it. We should just have it through the acoustic, which was perfect for the balance we did.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I miss about real musicians and real live music versus my technical setup, which is designed for an apartment, is that you don't get that live feedback as much, and you don't get to control the sound like that quite like you used to be able to in person, at least
Right.
with that type
Right.
of
Yeah.
collaboration.
And that's
Yeah,
that's the thing is like so you could equate it to so like the acoustic of I mean I had the little pickup that goes in the sound hole, right?
yeah, yeah.
So acoustic guitars actually do have the components inside the guitar. You can just plug it right in because it's acoustic electric.
Hmm.
I prefer, I mean, both have their qualities that are nice. You just plug and play basically.
Yeah,
But I mean, some of them even have like a tuner on the guitar like built in, but they're battery operated. So if the 9-volt battery runs out in the middle of your recording session, then you have to go find a battery if you don't have
and you
one.
know, oh no.
Like,
Luckily,
and
that
like
did not happen to our session because
yeah,
that would be a bummer. We
yeah,
played
right.
some really
Like
great music.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Like a bass guitar,
Yeah, yeah,
electric one, right? Sometimes there's passive versus active pickups. So passive requires power to it, so it usually has a 9-volt battery in the
hmm,
back. But active pickups, I know, wait, no, passive requires an amp, whereas active requires the battery, right? So,
yeah,
the passive needs an external amplifier in order to be able to make a sound like for the signal to be picked up by the computer, basically.
yeah.
Most recording software just does that for you, like nowadays.
Hmm.
But like back in the day, even before I was born, like they have the tube amps and like whatnot. If your tube burnt out, you were screwed. Like because those tubes
Yeah.
nowadays are super expensive because that technology is super old, right? And a lot of people don't even play with tube amps anymore because it's so, like they don't make that stuff a lot anymore, if at all. and repairing tube amps is insanely expensive. But that being
Mhm.
said, so like the fidelity versus like so like if you put a record on, right, it's like a vinyl record, it the organic like nature of it, like when they used to record onto literal like tape back in like with the Beatles and all like the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and whatever, they record directly to tape, and then the technology got more and more advanced. First it was 4 tracks, and then 8 tracks, and then 16 tracks, and 32 tracks or whatever,
Yeah.
however much the
Yeah.
tape could hold. And sometimes they would have to mix down one track on the tape to, or like on multiple tracks to a different like tape or whatever, however the process went to one track, and then they could add more instruments incrementally. Once, okay, I'm going to record the drums and then the bass, and we're going to mix that down to one track, and then we're going to record the guitar and then the vocals and whatever instruments you
Hmm.
want to put on there. So like the as technology gets more and more advanced, like I mean, sound recording only started like phonographs and stuff like that, and like the little like the tube like like players or whatever that had the I don't remember what it's called, like was it kinetoscope or something like that. Um, like stuff like that, like it evolved like over the past like 150 years. It's evolved very quickly,
Hmm.
compared to the rest of like human evolution, basically. Like this is like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
small of a
Very
amount
basic
compared to
stuff.
the rest of the time we've been here. So that's the thing, is like now with AI and stuff like that, technology is getting very, very advanced and very, very minute, but it's very exponential in that way. And so the more technology gets advanced, like the more and more you can do with it, but also the more that can go wrong, right?
Fair.
So like
Yeah.
it's all about working out the kinks, right?
Yeah,
So
100%. So I
yeah,
love that you brought up the past, though, like the 150 years and all that technology that has changed over time, because it is really true. Like what we did, that recording, which again was in one take, would
yeah,
originally have taken 100, 200 grand easy back in the day, minimum, to pull
yeah,
off something like that. But nowadays it's still expensive, but it is
right,
much more reasonable because there's so much more accessibility. And a lot of those problems have been worked out generationally by different musicians and different sound engineers and different people of technology to make it more streamlined and more efficient.
yeah,
And also with how it's moving forward, to kind of shift the conversation a little bit, we are
yeah,
currently live doing this back to forth on kind of a Zoom call situation, which is amazing. And that technology is a type of collaboration that wasn't around forever. It's even the smaller version of this, but it
yeah,
does allow, it has a lot of convenience though, because in person you can get the instant feedback, which is
mm,
required for music, which you can't quite do over Zoom call because there's like some latency issues. But
mm,
here we get the convenience of being able to do work and all this other stuff and do our days with this and whatnot.
right,
So that is something that I do love. I'm like, cool, this is great. We're in kind of a golden era for this kind of technology, especially
yeah,
when AI gets better. So
right,
yeah, I'm loving that. So the part of the sound, I guess, is that we did both in person and remote collaboration within a couple weeks, essentially.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, definitely. I was just gonna say, even when I was in sound engineering school, I graduated back in 2010,
Yeah.
and they had to have 4 external processors just to be able to like record in a live studio with like like however many channels, like 120 channels or whatever
Hmm.
the soundboard had. It was a really old console. It was like a SSL console from the 1960s, and they had a Neve console from the 1980s, which was one of the very first automated systems. And like it needed to be repaired quite a bit because it was very old. And then we had in the post-production studio, we had an electronic soundboard that could, like, it did all the automation and stuff like that. So like you pan one way, or like you make a volume change or whatever, it would do it automatically on the board for you, as if you when you programmed it. Basically, it would just play it back for you and repeat it on the soundboard.
Yeah.
So as technology evolves, it just like gets more and more complex, but also more simple in some ways, because like on the old consoles, like with the SSL, for instance, there's such thing as called a patch board, or a patch
Hmm.
base, actually. Sorry. So like they have these little tiny like 1/8 inch cables that, like like the cables that you have on your headphones before you put the 1/4 inch jack on it, basically, the 1/4 inch adapter, and then you have to literally route the audio so like it goes out this affects and then it goes into this one. And like if you mess that up, we had to learn signal flow in that way too. If you mess it up, there would be a lot of feedback because it's the signal is basically just looping through the effects,
Hmm.
that you're using or whatever. And like that, I mean, I don't even remember how to do that, honestly, because it was such a long time ago, and now I don't even utilize that technology anymore.
Yeah.
I could figure it out if I had to, but a lot of those patch bays are now digitally reproduced.
Yeah.
And so the technology you can like it like on what was that the name of that program? It's called Rewire, and like so, you can literally like uh, there it there was this so intermediate like third party like program basically that you could literally like work in one digital audio workstation and literally connect it to another digital audio workstation just by using this digital patch bay.
That's pretty cool.
Crazy.
Actually, it was interesting when you were talking. I just realized another aspect of the silent partner of technology, and that's muscle memory. So
Yeah.
back in the day with those physical patch bays, it was a memory. You remembered where it specifically was. It was like similar to playing a guitar or playing the piano. You know where the key is,
Mhm.
and that's part of the experience for the musician and the person using it. Whereas nowadays with this digital medium, I was just thinking like, for example, this Zoom call, it's just a mouse and a keyboard and I'm just looking at a screen. It's much more in my head. And then also when things it didn't quite save because a keyboard, the key stays where it's saved when I left the
Yeah.
room. But like
Okay.
unless some real funky physics are happening, it stayed in the same
Oh,
location. So
man.
but on this thing it like rearranged and I was like, oh no, I now have to like fix this thing and I was just using my mouse to do that. But
Mm.
that's a very intellectual experience, not a very physical one. So
Yeah.
that has to have a little bit of an impact on the sound of the collaboration that works nowadays. So the music today is probably sounding a little bit different than it did back in the day when people literally had to like physically do
Yeah.
things,
Yeah,
just because you hear it
absolutely. Yeah.
differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the school I went to, I learned from the best. Like the guy who ran my school, his name was Tom Tucker. He was Prince's head engineer for 10 years before he started this school. And so he knew what he was doing.
Hmm.
Like he worked at Paisley Park with Prince and like or the artist formerly known as Prince, as he's like to be called. I've heard stories, too many stories. But and having that background, like even when they tried to like, okay, you're gonna write a 3 to 4 minute pop song, it's like, okay, I don't really like that much pop music. Like pop music, I mean, you could define many different genres as pop, so to speak. But I really like writing like really long progressive like rock songs. So I would sit there and try to condense it into a 3 or 4 minute song. I have this idea, and it would come out like a 10 minute song. And some of the teachers loved it, and some of them hated it because like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you listen to this for 10 minutes? And like, I'm sorry, this is just who I am. Like now I can take that
I
that
love it.
musical knowledge that I have in my head and try and condense it into a 3 to 4 5 minute song, and it's more like even if you needed to chop it up into like different like movements of that song, sometimes like the progressive rock musicians that I like, like Yes and Jethro Tull, and Genesis, like all those artists that started back in like the late 60s, early 70s, they had very limited room, like for instance, like Yes. So like there's a one of my favorite album, actually my favorite album of Yes is called Tales from Topographic Oceans. Every side of the record is it's a double album. Every side is one song. And they wrote a half an hour song and they had to chop it up and condense it down to 21 to 22 minutes because it's all that could fit on one side of the record.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, there's a lot. That's literally a physical limitation to their creativity. So even if
Oh, yeah.
somebody wanted to make a 3 hour piece, it's like
Yeah. Or like
incredibly
Jethro
difficult to
Tull.
pull off back in the day.
Oh,
But
yeah.
nowadays we can just do that
Yeah.
instantly. Yeah, it's like who cares?
There's an album by Jethro Tull
Yeah.
called Thick as a Brick, and like they chopped up a 45-minute song into two separate pieces and put it on each side of the record. So
Hmm.
like that was one workaround for them.
Yeah.
But like who wants to listen to a 45-minute song? Number one, people these days because people's extension spans have gotten so little with technology
Fair.
because they're constantly scrolling on their phones or like they're watching like maybe like 30-second to a minute videos on TikTok or whatever. It's like their attention span is very, very, it's decreasing rapidly.
True.
And so in order to be able to get people's attention, you have to make it concise and you have to make it like approachable and digestible for people. And you have to kind of
Yeah.
talk in their own language, so to speak, you know?
That's
So,
true. That's actually a really interesting like dynamic going on because yes, the marketable thing is shorter, but the technology allows for more, like you said, like for you to write a 10-minute song and stuff, like it opens up the doors for more types of creatives where the
mhm.
technology was limited before. So the
Right.
breadth of the experience for the musician or the
Mhm.
creator is increasing exponentially, but then
Right.
also the type of content that is being accessible is limiting because
Yes.
I feel like also I think I've definitely heard a lot of musicians and myself I hear this as well where all
Mhm.
songs are kind of sounding mostly the same nowadays. Like
Yeah,
it's
right.
they're kind of like
Well,
merging into this like it's kind of like all phones kind of look exactly the same now. They're these little
yeah,
black bricks.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even though there's diversity of Android versus iOS, it's like is it really? Is there really diversity? So it's kind of
Right.
interesting that both the technology is increasing how many people can do it and also limiting what is accessible.
Right. And
Um,
like now we have these phones in
yeah.
our pockets. And like before, like teachers in the 80s, like you'll never have a calculator in your pocket. You'll never have a camera in your pocket. You'll never have all these
Entire
things in your pocket. What this is
the
like
entire internet. This is a computer.
literally in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
And like it's just now they have like the Google like AI glasses or whatever. And
Yeah.
like, oh,
That's
like what is the
interesting.
world becoming? You know, like I don't want to become a cyborg. That's not who I want to be. I just
Yeah,
want to,
yeah. It was
you know, like
especially with AI and stuff because the AI slop is becoming kind of an issue. If you haven't heard that term, it's basically just like
yeah,
with one click of a button, it's generating stuff, but because it's generating based off of old data,
content.
it's not innovating, it's not doing new things, and it kind of all just sounds roughly the same again.
Yeah, and like
So I
all
think that's why I
yeah.
invested a lot into my space. So for me, I'm a very tactile person because I came from the music place first, right? So is the clarinet, it's so tactile. If the reed is off a little, if the humidity is different, my sound is different. And so I'm used to that highest level of fidelity and feedback. But
Right.
with technical instruments, you don't have that nearly as much. So that's why I have an solid state logic. It's a newer one. It's the UF8s and stuff so that so I can mix with my ears, not with my eyes. So I can
Yeah.
physically move the faders. I have a squishy, rolly keyboard so I can physically press into it so that it helps me feel like I'm actually getting to do the vibrato I used to do on the clarinet and everything. So I have a lot of physical stuff which
Yeah.
requires more headache. But for me, but experientially, this again would not have been possible, especially things like the Rolly Seaboard like 10 years ago at all. So like being able to have all the actual physical diodes is
Mhm.
important for me as a musician, but the quality of the music isn't going to be necessarily. It's going to be. I hope my hope is that this will allow me to generate music that sounds different than AI slop in the mainstream, but also personally, I wouldn't want to make music that way. So it's like I just want to actually physically experience my instrument like a normal, like I want to say like a normal person, but that's like just my experience. It's like as an original musician, that's how we've created music for thousands of years as just humans, is in real life with actual sounds. And I
I
do
just
love the technology that allows it to happen with like the electric keyboards and stuff, but it's not real sound either. It's me clicking
no.
a button, it triggers a program,
Mhm.
then it triggers like all the code and stuff, and then boom,
Yeah.
it happens. And that is not the same as when you
No.
played the guitar and stuff like that. So I was like, I can't. My ultimate studio is a full studio with a band room. So that's
Oh,
my, but it's just not possible. But
yeah.
again, but it's also brilliant that it's not possible because I don't live in a giant space that I can do that with. That I'm able to do this still. I can still do it, and that's the beautiful part of the collaboration with the technology sound. That even though it's silent, you can't hear it on the recording it's
Mm.
still present in the fact that I was able to create this relatively conveniently from the place of my own apartment versus having to wait 10 years to get enough money to record the studio and then get the things and then I would
Right.
get one song after 10 years, not one song after three songs or whatever after one Saturday.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is like as technology gets more advanced, you know, like we're gonna have more accessibility, but then everybody's like, oh, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a musician.
Yeah.
Like you could, I mean, AI can create music now at the touch of a button. Is like that's not. for me, like there's this
Yeah.
huge debate in those industries. Like, what's the point of making music or film anymore if AI can just do it? But that's the thing is like if you overly rely on AI technology, that part, that creativity, the creative part of yourself is going to start to atrophy,
Yeah.
right? And so it's going to eventually like become like a vestigial structure. Like the human race isn't even going to need to use their creativity anymore because AI can do everything, right?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm about. Like what I'm about is like authentic human creation and connection and empowering the individual and using art as a form of a creativity in a way that you can express yourself and who you are and not just like I'm going to click this button and I'm going to generate a music track or a film or like that to me it defeats the purpose because it's about the process, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
It's about you can use AI as a tool. It's just that. It's just a tool. And like, but if you overuse it, you're going to become you're not going to become as creative as you could be. Like when you're a kid, like you're scribbling on a piece of paper and like, look, mom, look what I made. Like, isn't it great?
Yeah.
Yeah, honey, it's great. Like it could be terrible, absolutely terrible. But that's the thing about art, about music, about film. The more you practice, the better you're going to get, right? And so like when you're talking about reeds and stuff like that, it made me think like when I played the saxophone, like I don't like using synthetic reeds. It doesn't sound the same. Like they make reeds out of like it's a combination of like plastic and like fibers of like wood basically.
Hmm.
And it just doesn't vibrate the same. They're more durable, sure, but like they're mainly like if you're playing in a marching band and you accidentally drop your instrument, you're not going to break your reed. Or like it lasts a lot longer because wooden reeds, they crack, they chip, like and whatnot. They warp over time if you don't take care of them, right? So
Yeah.
like organic, yes, it's not as durable as synthetic things are. But you're going to get a lot better audio quality out of the organic instruments. Um, and that saxophone I was playing was $150 Bundy. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't like
Yeah.
even when I was in high school and middle school, like my family bought me a saxophone for $250 out of the newspaper. The newspaper of all places, like this is before the internet was like a huge thing.
Yeah.
They used the newspaper to buy me an instrument. Like that was like I
That's
was sixth or
wild.
I was in sixth grade when they bought me that saxophone. And like that carried me all the way throughout high school. Junior year, I was first chair wind ensemble, first chair jazz band, and saxophone marching band captain on a $250 saxophone. It's not about how expensive the instrument is how you play it, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever instrument you have at home, to our viewers out there, like it doesn't matter if it's a first act guitar, it doesn't matter if it's a $150 Bundy saxophone, it plays the same notes. It just matters like with saxophone, you have to change the shape of your mouth. It's called your embouchure, right? It's
Hmm.
mostly about the shape of your mouth and your airflow and like the way like you're moving your hands and like it's you want it to be tactile, you want it to be feel real, you want to like have it the instrument in your hands and be tangible in that sense because if you're digitally replicating everything, it's not going to sound the same, like you were saying.
It doesn't
It's
feel the
not going to
same.
feel the same. It's not going to give you the same authenticity. Like you're not going to be able to express yourself the same. It's convenient, but it doesn't sound as good. Is what I'm basically what
No.
I'm getting.
Yeah,
You know.
and it's wild. Even like back in the day, I've heard, especially with like vinyls versus
Mhm.
like digital replications of it, like MP3 versions of it, there is
Yeah.
literally a fidelity loss. It is
Oh yeah.
not, period, it's not as good as it used
No.
to. And you'll
No.
even hear, so on the improv video, again, linked below, you can hear me doing some cool stuff with, that's combining three cool technologies. It's Rolly Seaboard, which is a MP3, a 5 MP3 point. Basically, it's a squishy keyboard where I can
Yeah.
roll my finger and do all this cool stuff. I use
Mhm.
Swan Modeling Instruments, which is basically it uses rhythms. It uses formulas and whatnot to create synthesizers in real time. So it's not based off samples. So they didn't record someone playing the saxophone and then
Mhm.
it's just playing it back. It's actually being generated in live time. So there's a lot more tactile feedback with it,
Yeah.
as well as a this little guy, this little breath
Yeah.
support, so that it is trying to replicate it. But coming from somebody who has played the instrument to this, that is a very expensive combination of stuff that still is not as good, nearly as
Yeah.
good. a
No.
trained ear, my ear can hear the difference immediately. But the experience is still fun. But it is, if you can do the real instrument, do the real instrument. Like I would do almost anything to get my clarinet back, but the injury. But like it's like that tactile experience is something
Mhm.
that, and I'm glad that I'm in this era of AI and stuff because it is allowing me to push the boundaries. I'm like, how immersive can I make this? Like, I'm still going to spend 40 hours on this thing no matter what, but how far
Mm.
can I take this? That's kind of my philosophy with AI. It's like not twice as fast, twice as far, to
Mm.
push that human authentic experience. And that's
Right.
why, so I'm like, how immersive can I make it? Because, yeah, because it's way more accessible nowadays than it ever has been. It's just not the same. It's just not the same.
Even with AI, it's like the way I look at it, it's literally just a mirror of us as humans. You're like
Yep.
whatever you're feeding it, if you're feeding it your biases and stuff like that, it's just gonna spit it right back out. It's gonna compute it, and like the AI is gonna be like, this is what I think about what you think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or what you're
Mirror.
looking for. It's just like it's a reflection. That's all. It's just a tool. That's all it is. So
Hmm.
like with any instrument, with even with AI, with any tool, with any camera, it becomes an extension of you, literally. Like when I'm using my camera, like this is what I see in my mind, and this is my this like even my arms, this is an extension of my mind, right? Like
Yep.
my limbs are literally just an extension of me. And so these are just tools as well. And so when I am using an instrument or a piece of technology, I am literally translating what's in my head onto a page, onto a screen,
Hmm.
into a program. This is what I'm hearing, and if I'm not hearing or seeing like visually or audioly what I'm looking for, like the way my mind works, it's very like I have a tendency to remember like lyrics and like lines from movies and like my memory is more auditory, whereas yours is probably more visual.
Yeah.
Um, and so like for me, like I don't have a photographic memory. I have a more of a phonographic memory, as I said, like it's called a echoic memory, technically. Um, and it's not like you want the that kinetic, like energy, the flow, the workflow that it once you have a solid workflow, like it just builds and builds momentum basically because the more energy you put into it,
Yeah.
like with music and film, just with anything in life, the more energy you put into it, the more you're going to get back out of it, the more feedback
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
even with AI.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
yeah.
So actually, that reminded me about compounding systems, which is really
Hmm.
important. So the more you give it, the more it comes back. And
Yeah.
that actually shifts kind of to the last topic I want to talk about, which was kind of that post-production aspect of it, and
Yeah.
about the systems that
Mm.
we've been kind of we've been talking about. We are compounding systems actually. We are talking about the systems that happened before, during, remote, and now also after. All these systems have to be aligned and have to be streamlined enough to work, but there are significant limitations. And some of that has to do
Mm.
with cost, some of that has to do with the shifting from owning to having to do monthly subscriptions, which is kind of an industry standard now. And what are the benefits and pros of that? Like, for example, this Zoom. Last time we did this Zoom meeting last week, had the free version. And it kept cutting us off after 40 minutes. And we're like, okay, well, we have to cut the last 10 seconds of that. Let's restart and do it again. And then we're like, okay, let's just eat the bullet and just do do the pro workspace thing. And we did it. I did it for 1 month, so it's working great. So one super low cost for 1 month, one-off projects. I love my good free trial or short-term thing. But also, it's one of those things that if I wanted to continue using this could cost a lot of money over a long period of time. And
Mm.
then also, every single part of what we talked about costs a subscription. Every single part of it, from the Zoom to the Logic to the everything. There's some like every single thing.
Yep.
Some of the
Yep.
VSTs you
All
were
of it.
hearing me sound on that improv below costs every single month. I have to pay a subscription to have those specific
Mhm.
types of sounds because they're high quality sounds. And it's just those,
Yep. Yep.
they add up. So we were just literally talking this morning about Dropbox and Google Drive. So let's talk about that a little bit from your perspective. Yeah.
Quick side note before I
Yeah. Yeah.
forget, I thought of something earlier that I don't want to forget before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
So Nirvana's Nevermind album, I
Hmm.
believe, was the first album fully recorded on a digital audio workstation, basically. It
Ooh.
was the first fully
Hmm.
electronically recorded album back in 91.
That's crazy.
I was born in 89, right? So
Yeah.
like that date me, like, but that was the grunge era. Like when Nevermind came out, like I was like a year and a half to 2 years old, like didn't remember Kurt Cobain, like when he like, when he died or whatever. And like for me, even though I wasn't around during that time period, I mean, I was, but I was a little kid. I didn't remember that, like his music still had a huge impact on me.
Hmm.
Right. And so like music has a tendency, like it could be Bach, it could be Beethoven, Mozart, anything. It could be classical, it could be rock, it could be jazz. Music and art and film have a tendency to talk across time.
Yeah.
And like and talking about technology and the compression of time, right? And like now we're living in this age where everything has become so complex, but yet so simplified in the sense that the more complex technology gets, the more simple it is to be able to use it because humanity has spent so long developing this technology. Like before, like they had gigantic computers that has like 5 MB of memory and they literally have to push it onto a truck, right? And then it has like vacuum tubes and all this stuff. And now we got this,
Yep.
right? And computers and like all this stuff. And so just wanted to say like the more and more that I mean, even 35, whatever year, 34 years ago, like technology was still being developed and it still is to this day.
Hmm.
And that was the first album fully recorded on a digital, like a computer, like instead of on tape. And just think of how big that album was and how
Yeah.
much.
That's wild. That gives me so much perspective, though. I was like, my entire life, I've only known digital workstations. So I was
Yeah.
like, it's not even that old. It's like,
If Beatles never existed, think like if they never got as popular as they did, and like some people think, like the Beatles are overrated, and like if they didn't do the thing that they
mm,
did, um so many artists never would have been influenced by that music. And they were influenced by Bob Dylan. He was influenced by, like Lead Belly and maybe all these other like blues and jazz musicians or whatever. Like just thinking about that and like dating it back even to like the 1800s, like think how far we've come through the Industrial Revolution up until
yeah,
now. And like
yeah.
that 200 year, like not even 200, like 100, whatever year, 175, 150 years or whatever, like human evolution has just gotten more and more exponentially
Hmm.
advanced. Like it just,
It's,
it's bad,
dude, and I just had the biggest aha moment, though. Okay, so I've been doing these like men's dances and trying to like learn how
Mhm.
to do something called the five rhythms, essentially, which is this kind of like way of using music to evoke movement specifically. And there's different types of rhythms that you can have people move in. And it was so funny. All the music that actually moves people like really well happens around the 90s or before that point. And I was just realizing that's one of the that technology had an impact on music. So
Mhm.
that was the quantized grid. So
Yep.
even though we have EDM music that really hits hard, it
Yeah.
doesn't. It's more
It's
like
over.
listening music. It hits
It's
you in your
overly
head more than your body. Whereas
Yeah.
back in the day, there's in order to get an actual groove, it has to have an organic feel. Of course, musicians today still can do that, but it's just like the
Right.
biggest songs back in the day used to use it because there was no digital workstation that was automatically forcing people onto a grid and stuff. There were some, I think, some techniques with like meshing with tape and stuff, but like it
Right.
wasn't as mainstream as it is nowadays. And that technology shift
Mhm.
affect, even though silent, nobody heard it, we could hear it in the music, right? Because it shifted how people created music. And today, for example, 120 beats per measure and C major, most common every single song, right there, boom. And then that's also part of why it all sounds the same now as well, is because we have access to the same resource and so many more people have access to it. So it's not just the best of the best as
Right.
well. So to get to that level back in the 90s, it was like you
Yeah.
really had something special, but like you had to hit that. But whereas nowadays,
Yeah.
anybody can do it. Like AI, literally a baby can just hit a button and like make a song.
Before the
Um,
advent of auto tune and all that stuff,
the auto
like
tune, yeah,
you know,
silent
you,
but very notable. I love
yeah.
that. Anyways, yeah. So Yeah, the only last thing, only last tidbit before we sign off here was data.
Post. Yeah.
So was the amount of data that is used to produce this stuff.
Mhm.
And it's only increasing how much, like literally just rendering some of these videos, like 80
Yeah.
gigs just to render one video or whatever. I was like, what in the world? And then it's
Yeah.
just like skyrocketing off. And of course,
Mhm.
those all come with different types of costs involved for the
Mhm.
production of it. Again,
Yeah.
significantly lower than back in the day, but still has an impact. And I think the main impact I can think personally is
Mhm.
the financial impact on my nervous system personally. It's like, oh wait, no, this is hitting me harder than it would have if we didn't have this impact, right?
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
I always try finding the most efficient way of doing things. So I'm always like, how do I streamline this system to make it as effective, but then also within
Mhm.
price range budget? Because if we
Yeah.
wanted to, you could spend an infinite amount of money on this stuff. It's like just
Yeah.
out the roof,
Yeah.
and that financial cost and that is part of the technology is part of the
Mhm.
sound of technology, right?
Right.
Everything I've done costs money. Everything you've done costs money to pull off, even if
Yes.
it looks different
Right.
nowadays.
Yeah.
And the fact that we don't get to own it anymore also kind of ticks me off. It's
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
don't own the data, we don't own the technology. In most cases, we have to perpetually, forever use that technology under their guidelines. And if they change something, you don't have access to it anymore.
Yeah.
So that has an impact on me personally when I collaborate with technology
Mm.
in general.
That makes sense. Yeah. Some of the tools are only as good as like so like the difference between like say like me or you
Yeah.
or like somebody else who's just getting started, right? Like maybe they don't have enough money to go to college to do these things. They want
Mm-hmm.
to learn everything online or
Yeah.
read a book or just do it by learn by doing or like whatever or learn, just being on set or being in a music studio or whatever. But those you have to know these industries are very hard to get into because you have to know the right people
Yeah.
in that instance. And like if you
Yeah.
really want to get into a music studio or on a film set, like you have to have that opportunity. And then even then you have to be just good enough to be able to help them do what they're doing because they've been doing this for so long and so that's where the personal development aspect comes
Yeah.
in. Because if you don't personally develop yourself and your skill set, then you are not going to be able to help other people or even do your own projects. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to get frustrated at first. You're going to get, angry sometimes, like when technology is like, why
Yeah.
won't
Yeah.
you
Why does
kick
it?
and, it's kicking and screaming. You're like, sometimes you just whap the computer upside the head. Like, please just work, like
Patience, right?
yeah,
Patience.
patience is
So,
key. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
Anyway,
sorry, what were you gonna say?
no, no. Anyways, I just wanted to thank you so much for this conversation because it's been really great exploring the silent partner of the sound of collaboration. So I wanted to give you one last opportunity. Is there any last pieces of advice or conversations you would love to add to this silent partner of technology and this sound of collaboration that we explored today before we sign off?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for keeping me on point because I could have gone much further
Oh,
with that thought process. And so that's the other thing is like also being mindful of your own capacity, like not like so if you think of your brain like a organic computer in that sense, like you have a process, your brain's trying to process so much information, like when you are learning this stuff, if you give yourself so your bandwidth, so to speak, is not going to be you're not going to be overloading your system like your body, your brain. You're not going to be overutilizing CPU or RAM or like in your head. Your brain it only
yeah,
has so
yeah.
much processing power. It's much faster than your brain processes information much more quickly than a computer. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is just a replication. Anything that man has ever done is only replicating nature, basically. And so give yourself time, be patient with yourself because just because you are hearing something in your head or seeing something in your mind, and you're not being able to replicate it right away, don't get too frustrated with yourself because this is a process.
Mm-hmm.
Frustration is a part of the process. There's a great lyric that I like to refer to. It's from Tool's song Schism. It's finding beauty in the dissonance. And so I always like harken back to that. It's like finding beauty in the distance. Okay, like how, even in my own life, how can I apply that? mentality to like, okay, life isn't perfect. We all make mistakes. We're just human, right? So like as my hands are just extensions of my mind and my, myself basically, like how can you apply that principle to everyday life as well as learning how to use a piece of technology or learning how to play a musical
Yeah, yeah,
instrument, learning how to, the friction and the dissonance is there for a reason. So
yeah.
that's all I really wanted to say, and I really appreciate you having me on today. And thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, that frustration helps you grow. Don't streamline
It
it too
really does.
much with
It helps you
technology.
grow. You wouldn't
So,
grow if it wasn't there.
so
Yep.
yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. Definitely stay tuned for the next sound of collaboration that's going to be coming up soon.